10 years ago when Edge had to retire following WrestleMania 27. He'd retained title over Alberto Del Rio, and then he
Yeah.
ended up retiring a short time later. Unbeknownst to us, Finn, he would end up returning sort of 9 years later. But what do you remember? Because you were obviously covering it for the magazine at the time as well, about Edge retiring. It wasn't really widely known in wrestling because he'd talked quite publicly about he was going to do one more year. He wanted a feud against Christian, and it kind of was taken away.
It was, yeah. Well, this was the cover of Power Slam. I always thought it was a really good cover, that one.
Yeah,
Goodbye, Edge. Sadly, the issue did not sell well. I was very disappointed with the sales figures of that issue. And you look back and you think, oh, what a great cover. That's kind of, and I remember a few people say, oh, what a great cover that was, Finley. It's like, oh, it didn't translate into sales. Yeah, I mean, it was, severe spinal stenosis. He was really worried at the time. He was trembling in his arms. And I think at one point he couldn't even carry his bags. It was that bad, his neck. So he knew things were really bad. And he went for that MRI and it came back, listen, you just need to retire immediately. If you continue wrestling, you're risking severely, there's a very high probability that you might suffer paralysis. It was going to lead to, I think he had a defense against Christian, didn't he? Set for the following pay-per-view. I think that's correct.
Well, no, because Christian ended up subbing for him against Del Rio and won the title. I don't know if the Christian match was booked, but it probably was going to happen. But
I think that was where it was. That was the direction it was supposed to go in. I think it was going to be Christian versus Edge at the next pay-per-view, and then Edge had to vacate the title, and then that led to the match you just described, which Christian won. Edge made an appearance at ringside, didn't he? Afterwards, and it was really quite emotional. I felt. Edge there congratulating Christian on his title win. So I mean, it was really sad, because he'd done a lot. I mean, he had that scare obviously back in 2003 when he'd undergone neck surgery then and was out for I think just over a year. So I mean, there was a lot of concern at that point in time that he might not wrestle again, and I think he was also aware after having that original neck fusion surgery in 2003 that when he did return, he wasn't going to be wrestling he wasn't going to continue wrestling until he was 45. He was already on borrowed time, especially given all the stunts he did and the matches that he'd been in. So I mean, I think even though it was obviously very sad when he did retire in 2011. He had a tremendous run as a rated R superstar. That was the character that he created for himself in 2005. He had that amazing, actually, was it 2004 that he created that character? 2004.
I think Rated R Superstar was when because he turned heel in late 2004 on Shawn Michaels and stuff.
Absolutely. So then he'd had that really good run in 2005. He'd become champion. Defeated, cashed in Money in the Bank, hadn't he, at
New Year's Revolution.
New Year's Revolution 2006 in January. Had that amazing 3-week run as champ where ratings went through the roof. Obviously had the live sex celebration with Lita, which he doesn't like to talk about now, does he, Kenny?
It's not something that's probably wise to bring up, I wouldn't say.
So he had that amazing run there, dropped the belt back to Cena. I mean, that match he had with Foley at WrestleMania 22 pretty much stole the show, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. It was the best match in the show by a mile. Better than the main event, better than it was. And Foley finally got his WrestleMania moment, which he'd wanted for so many years.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, the pinnacle of his career was being ranked number 1 in the PS50 that year. I mean, it goes without saying, doesn't it? So he had numerous Power Slam covers. I'm sure that's probably second on his list of career achievements. Number 1 in PS50, Power Slam covers, of course. But yeah, he did have an amazing run, and as a heel and a face, I think he was absolutely detestable as a heel. Wasn't as good as a face as he was as a heel, but he actually did have some good little run there as a heel as well as a face later that decade. And ended up having to retire. I think it was 37 when he retired in 2011. And then it did seem. I know you thought that he was going to come back, and in fact, you knew because I was with you when he watching Royal Rumble. Was it last year? Or was it year before?
To
2019,
last year, yeah, last year. No,
or
it was
was it right?
2020.
2020. So you'd sort of found out somehow through the heard it through the grapevine that Edge was going to be making a comeback, and he did in that match, and that was quite a moment. And then the Randy Orton feud didn't really measure up to expectations. They had those matches that lasted too long. I think WWE really scuppered them.
They had
With
a
that
really good build up
rematch.
to WrestleMania. Their Mania build up was so good, and then we said this before. I think that Edge and Orton were the most. They were the biggest sufferers of no crowd last year, because then they had to do that long, PC match instead, and it just once you'd had all the build up, it just felt like you needed that crowd there.